It talks about creating a comprehensive communication assistant that promotes true understanding. So this is much more than just producing text that is free of mistakes. It's also supposed to be clear and compelling. So with regard to spelling, punctuation, but also clarity and effectiveness. Grammarly also claims to possess contextual awareness, and it pays attention to level of formality, for example, the audience, style, intent, and tone, and all of this can actually be defined by the user. Grammarly is also updated continually, which is something that we also experience ourselves over the course of our project.
We think it will be helpful to understand a little bit about the technology behind Grammarly, in order to better understand why it recognizes certain language mistakes, but not so much others. So Grammarly is one of the leading AI-based grammar checkers nowadays, but that's not how grammar checking software started. The first generation of grammar checkers relied simply on matching patterns and replacing strings. For example, the programs were able to discover that isn't should be changed to isn't with an apostrophe. The second generation of grammar checking software was then able to really process syntax, which means it was programmed with certain rules of what is possible in a language and what is not possible, and was able to make, or these grammar checkers were then able to make suggestions accordingly. As I said, Grammarly is now belongs to the newest generation of grammar checkers. It combines what the previous generation was already able to do, such as recognizing rules and patterns, but it also works with the help of artificial intelligence techniques. So that's what's really modern about it. The AI techniques that Grammarly uses are machine learning, including deep learning and natural language processing. Deep learning is a method of machine learning which functions mainly without human supervision, which means it's not humans who tell the computer what to accept, what not to accept, what to do, what not to do, but the computer, just like human beings, learns with the help of examples. So usually what computer scientists would do is enter massive amounts of data, and the AI algorithms would then figure out the rules on their own. The human supervisors might not even know what the computer is using to actually say what's right, what's wrong. Which is why this kind of deep learning can be compared to a black box. This can go very well, but it can also be problematic. There was an experiment that researchers tried. They fed a computer, an artificial intelligence algorithm, thousands or perhaps even millions of pictures of dogs and wolves. And then the computer's task was to figure out the features, and so that it was then able to identify what a dog is and what a wolf is. This seemed to work quite well. In most cases, the AI program was able to distinguish the two species. But then along came a picture of a chihuahua surrounded by snow somewhere, and the computer kept claiming that it must be a wolf. So researchers at first had no idea what was going on. Why was a chihuahua all of a sudden identified as a wolf? And it turned out that what the AI program had focused on was not the actual animals, but rather their surroundings. If the animal was surrounded by a lot of snow and forest or something along these lines, it identified the animal as a wolf, because that's where wolves are usually found. And if there was an urban setting, flat streets or so on, it was identified as a dog. So the chihuahua in the snow was identified as a wolf. And of course, this problem that deep learning algorithms can have extends to language as well. What Grammarly and other computer programs also need to be able to do in order to process natural language is they need to be able to recognize the meaning of spoken and written language. And this only works if a certain amount of common sense knowledge is present, and if they can also recognize hidden and implicit meanings. For example, we all know that if we drop a ball, it will actually drop to the floor and it will not fly upwards, which means that we can just leave out certain information because to us it's obvious. The computer, of course, doesn't know these kinds of things. So there might be problems figuring things out from context. Another problem with natural language processing is that when it comes to context or jokes or whatever, more data will not help. And that's how deep learning algorithms usually work. They work on the basis of data. So in cases where more data is just not helpful, deep learning algorithms might just not be very successful.
All right, we'd now like to give you a little bit of background on our project. We both, as we said, teach at the university, at the English department here in Graz, and we both teach a first-year language course with a focus on grammar and writing, where we have been using a process writing approach for a long time. Usually this means the students have to submit 2 assignments over the course of the semester. They submit a first draft, receive feedback from their teacher, and then submit a second draft. For our project, we decided to include peer reviewing and Grammarly into this process. So what happened was that the students submitted a first draft of the first assignment. They received detailed instructions for peer reviewing and for using Grammarly to improve their text. And then they submitted this second draft for teacher feedback. For the second writing assignment in the same course, they were not explicitly given any instructions on how to review the text, and they were free to use Grammarly or not. And then they received teacher feedback in a second step. Once they had completed both writing assignments, we had them fill in a questionnaire about their experiences with using Grammarly in the writing process. What was our motivation? Grammarly is an editing tool, and we decided to use it in an ELT context. So what we were interested in is Grammarly's main strengths and weaknesses in this particular setting from an ELT perspective. And we asked ourselves how Grammarly can be used efficiently and meaningfully within a process writing approach such as the one we use in our course. These were the instructions our students received for peer reviewing the first assignment. So they produced the text and then they were told to give their text to a partner to review, and they were specifically told to pay attention to language, not just content, and then return the assignment to the writer. And at that stage, they didn't hand it in to their teacher. And in the next step, that's when they actually used Grammarly. I should say at this point that we didn't tell them to pay for a subscription. So they were told to work with the free version of Grammarly, the version of Grammarly, the basic version that is freely available. They were told to copy and paste their assignment into Grammarly and then mark all the corrections suggested by the tool on their original printout using different colors for the suggestions they decide to adopt and the ones they decide to reject. They were also told to experiment with what we call the hidden features. Those were premium features that you can't access without a subscription, but we'll talk about that a bit later.
It appears that that picture has gone missing. Okay. We wanted to show you what it looks like if Grammarly is used. Okay. So unfortunately, since the picture is not here, we can't show you what it looks like. But what basically happens is that if you copy paste a text into Grammarly, it will underline things in different colors depending on the category of mistake. For basic corrections, it uses red, and then if you click on the suggestion, it tells you how to fix it. For example, get rid of the comma, add the comma, change the spelling, or so on. There are also features regarding clarity. So it will tell you, leave out this word. And then we have premium features. For premium features, Grammarly will only tell you what exactly is wrong if you pay for the premium version. But if not, you can still work with these premium features, because what happens is that Grammarly will still underline the phrases and sentences. If you click on them, however, you won't see any further information, but you'll see a number of overall premium mistakes and a rough categorization into, well, different categories. For example, passive voice or commas in complex sentences. And then if you play around with this a little bit and change a sentence, and then the number decreases, then you now know, okay, so I've discovered this one mistake. So working with these premium features, if you don't actually pay, just requires a little bit more experimentation. This is what the version looked like that we got from the students. And as my colleague just said before, they told us, or they highlighted mistakes that they chose to adopt, to reject, what the peers corrected for them, and the hidden features they managed to discover. We'd now like to summarize briefly what we believe are Grammarly's main strengths and weaknesses. You'll see that we have quite a lot of examples on our slides, but we do not attempt to discuss every single one of them in detail. We just thought that in case you're interested, presentation will be available afterwards, so you can have a look at the individual examples in more detail. We discovered that apparently Grammarly, well, unsurprisingly really, is able to handle areas of grammar better that are strictly rule-based. For example, punctuation and spelling. But with other areas of grammar, which are more context-dependent, Grammarly has a bit more trouble. Let's start with punctuation. Grammarly knows where commas are supposed to be. There's not supposed to be commas before that, for example. It's one of the latter examples we have on this slide. She answered that she can reuse the bottle and reduce the amount of plastic. She uses, there should not be a comma before that, and Grammarly is aware of that. So Grammarly is able to add commas and also tell its users that they should get rid of commas. This is the success rate there we found is relatively high. Grammarly also discovers missing hyphens. For example, the so-called zero-waste lifestyle, Grammarly is aware that there should be hyphens there, but it struggles a little bit with apostrophes, possessive apostrophes, because they are just a bit more context dependent. For example, if you say physical activity plays a huge role in humans' health, it's not supposed to be humans' health singular, but rather humans' health plural, but Grammarly did not discover this mistake. Users on Grammarly are also able to choose language preferences. You can choose between Australian, Canadian, American, and British English, and depending on the language variety you choose, Grammarly will follow different spelling conventions and also comma conventions. It'll either demand that users use the Oxford comma or not, for example. Spelling, if it's just dependent on individual words, works quite well. Grammarly did discover in students' assignments that items is supposed to be spelled with a T and that divided is not supposed to be spelled with an E. However, what we believe is a bit strange is that Grammarly will not point out capitalization mistakes other than I. So it will correct the personal pronoun I, but if a student, for example, capitalizes school or university or student, Grammarly will not point this out.
You have that.
Sorry?
5 minutes to go.
Okay.
Thank you.
And as can be expected, spelling in context does not work as well. The first price was a car is wrong, but Grammarly did not detect it. On the other hand, if it's more obvious to pay the price rather than to pay the price, Grammarly was able to detect that. Not you. There are also collocations. Grammarly can point them out sometimes. Usually these are included in the premium features, but it will not always work. So it really depends on how complex the sentence is. What you see here highlighted in red is a problem with passive constructions that Grammarly has. That, in our opinion, is one of the biggest problems. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Right, a few more comments about grammar. We already said it does well with very rule-based aspects of grammar, so it's not surprising prepositions are usually detected well. Let's start with doing something is replaced by, for example. Similarly, articles, a big impact on my view of environment should be the environment. This is something that is found very reliably. Agreement was a really interesting case because you'd kind of assume this falls in a similar category, but we found a few cases where Grammarly doesn't do very well with agreement, and I'd like to draw your attention to the second example here, which we experimented with a bit. Local YouTubers started sharing their experiences, so this should obviously be YouTubers plural. But it seems that the spelling throws Grammarly off here. If you spell YouTube with a capital T, it doesn't spot the agreement mistake anymore. Adjective adverb in clear cases, however, works very reliably. Tenses, as you will probably expect, only work well with obvious markers, such as yesterday for a past tense or since for a present perfect. So if such a marker is present, a tense mistake is also detected. With hypothetical language, we found that in simple hypothetical constructions, the success rate is very high, but once the sentence is more complicated, it doesn't work so well anymore. Skip this one.
So, as I said before, Grammarly does not like passive constructions in general. It will always ask its users to get rid of them, which sometimes makes sense, of course. If you have a look at the first sentence here, from personal experience, I am unable to say. Grammarly wants you to get rid of that, and we agree that that makes sense. However, in the next sentence, Grammarly wants users to write further steps need to take to preserve, which is obvious nonsense. That's just because Grammarly labels all passive phrases independently of their context as passive voice misuse.
I think we should probably skip ahead to the conclusions. Okay. Right, we don't have time to go into any detail as far as the results of our questionnaire are concerned. Maybe I can summarize by saying the overall reaction of our students to Grammarly was very positive, and they said when they were asked if they thought Grammarly was worth the additional effort, 86% of them said yes, and almost as many indicated that they would use the tool again in the future. Pedagogical implications, because we got into this because we wanted to see how we can use this editing tool for teaching. We, based on our experiences and results, we would say how useful it is probably also depends on the language level of the students, because students do need a sound knowledge of grammar, specifically to weed out incorrect suggestions made by the tool, such as the examples Victoria just explained. They also need, it's not just about proficiency, they also need to be familiar with a certain type of meta-language, because Grammarly does use difficult terms such as concise and redundant in the comments. This has already improved, in our opinion, compared to earlier versions, but you still need to be familiar with this terminology to benefit from those suggestions. This is where we come in. We also think that the teacher or facilitator has a very big role to play in this. If you're going to use an editing tool for language teaching, students are going to need guidance and learner training to be made aware of the limitations of the tool, for example, and the problems with like tense use and this attitude towards using the passive. The last thing is something we hope will happen because Grammarly is updated continuously. We hope that maybe in the future you will also be able to set it to different proficiency levels. Just like now you can pick your style, for example, your level of formality, because right now the same issues are addressed in all texts regardless of the writer's needs, and it would be even more helpful for learners of English if they could adjust the level of proficiency. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation, and thank you for stepping in as well because of the issue with the presentation before. Thank you, and for flexibly going on even when the slide with the PowerPoint was. So thank you for that. I don't know whether there are questions. If not, I have a particular question myself. Any questions anyone would like to ask Victoria and Ute, right?
Yes, I do have a question.
Okay, so go ahead, please, show.
Hello, my name is Shao Wei. I'm a staff fellow in the English department of University of Buffalo in the United States. I'm also a first-year English composition instructor myself. I'm just wondering that.
Oh, your microphone is not very clear. I mean, can you maybe either put your microphone a bit far from your mouth or else type the question, or, because we are not managing. I don't know.
No, we can't hear very well.
We can't hear that very well. Sorry for that.
Can you hear me now?
Now, yes, now much better. Thank you.
I'm sorry about that. So yeah, I just have a question about students' like feedback, motivation of like they're using this Grammarly AI tool. Because I'm just wondering that how did they notice that, for example, probably in the course of the semester they would be picked by Grammarly for the repetitive mistakes, and then I'm especially interested in their motivation of learning grammar actively on their own when they keep using this Grammarly tool. If that makes sense to you, because I'm just wondering that, let's say that there is the scenario where Grammarly is not available, which is spoken English, right? Grammarly will not be able to help you when you're speaking English. So I'm just saying that if they keep using, like relying on Grammarly, would they actively come back later and pick up the repetitive errors, probably picked up by Grammarly, and then learn on their own, so that in a scenario where Grammarly is not available, they will not repeat the same grammatical mistakes too. So I'm just like wondering that would you, or from the perspective of instructor, would you come back and ask them to reflect on the frequent mistakes that Grammarly found for them? That's my question.
Okay, yes, so I think it's important to use Grammarly, as I said, as part of the learning process. So I don't think they'll become overly reliant on it, because Grammarly is only part of the process writing that they do. It's one of the tools they use, and it's clear in the context of the course that we're interested in writing as a process and we are not so interested in the product. So the aim of Grammarly within this context is not to finally submit an assignment, that is free of errors and that is pretty much perfect. It's about playing around with the tool, looking at the suggestions, looking for the hidden suggestions, experimenting, and so on. So I do think that they will pick up on repetitive errors because they have teacher support. I don't know if that would work automatically if you just use Grammarly on your own, but within this framework where you have an instructor who also gives feedback, because we had a first step with peer review, then we had Grammarly, and then we had teacher feedback, I do think that there's a learning effect that's supported by the use of this tool. That would be my assessment of this.
Thank you for that reply. One other question. Somebody is asking, as instructors, will you continue to use Grammarly in your writing courses from now on?
What do we say? I will continue making them aware that they have this option because, like we said, a vast majority of them did think it was really helpful and it helped them to improve. They also indicated they would use it again in the future for more important assignments like papers and so on. So I will not use it in every course, but I think I will continue making them aware of the fact that Grammarly is available.
And I think it's also important that we do so because that's, Victoria just reminded me, they did say that when they had to write like more important assignments, like maybe a BA thesis or a seminar paper, they would use Grammarly. And I think knowing that, it's particularly important for us to give them the support they need because it's a valuable tool, but you do have to know how to use it. So yes, I'm with Victoria. I'll definitely continue to try and bring it into my classes.
And with that question, I would like to add one personal comment as a language teacher this time, as well as a teacher of foreign languages. And also I was inspired by what you said, Ola and Victoria, because I remember back in my time and also along the years, there was always a drive against using, for example, Google Translate or these available tools. And through your presentation, you helped us realize, don't make enemies of technology. I mean, critically look at it as you are doing, and you are reflecting about it, and you are eventually pointing things out which we all should keep in mind. Ola, you mentioned as well the importance of a language teacher and the guidance of a teacher using all this with the students. I mean, not leaving students alone at home or using it. And through this, what could be a tool which we look at it as an enemy could be a valuable tool. And thank you for your presentation, both. And honestly, it would be good if maybe your feedback could reach Grammarly somehow, because that's my question. My last question, is there any initiative how you could contact maybe the